Much like one of the series' disturbing and gruesome necromorphs, Dead Space was resurrected last year violently and aggressively and brought back to critical acclaim and praise from fans of the franchise who had waited for just about any kind of news from the old Visceral Games Studios classic that a lot of people absolutely loved in the late 2000s. But unfortunately, due to low sales, it looks like the Dead Space franchise has been put on hold again, according to Jeff Grubb, and this has been backed up by an article on Bloomberg.com by Jason Schreier titled "Dead Space franchise is officially on hold at Electronic Arts." Hey everybody, I'm LittleBobby here with Direct Gaming, and we're going to talk today about EA putting the kibosh on the Dead Space franchise yet again. But if you find yourself enjoying this video and you want to join the discussion, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It's a great way to support what we do here for free. We are trying to hit 5,000 subs by the end of this year, and any and all support helps us with that. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get into it. So in this article by Jason Schreier reads, Electronic Arts Inc. put the Dead Space series on ice for a second time, despite the release of the critically acclaimed remake last year that appeared to give new life to the troubled video game franchise. Although news that the sci-fi horror series was shelved came out this week, EA made the decision as early as last spring, according to people familiar with the project. Hopes for a new Dead Space game at EA were derailed after sales of the remake missed the company's expectations, said the people who asked not to be identified because they weren't authorized to speak publicly. After finishing the Dead Space remake, which was released in January 2023, a small team at Electronic Arts subsidiary Motive spent a few months conceiving ideas for a new entry in the series, said the people, but those plans were never given a green light and fizzled before they could get very far. Since last summer, that team has instead been exploring other ideas while the bulk of developers who worked on Dead Space moved on to different projects. The Giant Bomb YouTube channel suggested Wednesday that Motive had been developing a remake of Dead Space 2 that was shelved. Electronic Arts, based in Redwood City, California, denied the report of that work, telling the gaming site IGN, "We don't normally comment on rumors, but there is no validity to this story." An EA spokesperson declined to comment further to Bloomberg. The series, introduced in 2008, was well received by fans but never turned into the blockbuster that management envisioned. Following the disappointing 2013 release of Dead Space 3, the company shelved the series for a decade before bringing it back last year with a high-end remake of the first entry that received top review scores. Motive said this week it is working on 2 games, a previously announced Iron Man project and a new Battlefield, which left the fate of the sci-fi horror series in question. One of the things here that's notable about this story is that EA did come out and say, hey, we never greenlit a Dead Space 2, we were not planning on a Dead Space 2. I fully believe that from EA's side. What I also believe is that maybe Motive had some early drawn up plans, and so maybe someone's talking to someone at Motive who said, yeah, we were going to plan on it because we were assuming this was going to do good. But unfortunately, it looks like the sales of Dead Space Remake were not enough for EA to feel like it was justifiable to pursue work on a second entry into this series. Now, personally, I love Dead Space, and I've mentioned it many times. I worked on the original as a tester for compliance, which is like making sure everything lines up for first party, right? You press like the PlayStation button on your PlayStation controller and the PlayStation menu thing pops up. That kind of stuff is what I was testing, and kind of end of life right before gold testing. So basically making sure that like stuff that most normal everyday players would do was going to work for the game. And I gotta say that Dead Space is my favorite title to say that I worked on in the games industry. That is absolutely, in my opinion, the most fantastic title that we worked on while I was there. And keep in mind, we worked on Dragon Age Origins while I was there, which is great too. But I feel like Dead Space, even the original, still holds up today way better than the original Dragon Age Origins, which feels pretty dated now. It feels like playing really old World of Warcraft, but maybe that's just me. Now, I certainly do think Motive is a talented studio. Let's remember they worked on the Star Wars Squadrons game, which was pretty rad, and that game kind of shows where their know-how might go into Battlefield. Maybe they're going to be responsible for like helping tune vehicular combat and stuff, which I think Battlefield could use a little bit of. But unfortunately, it does mean for us survival horror fans, especially those who are fans of Dead Space, that we are not going to see that franchise come back. Personally, I would love to see them at least go through and do a Dead Space 2 remake, because really, the first one is like super classic. The second one is better though. I recently played that again on my Steam Deck. Played through it after I played the remake, I think last year, and man, I was like, this game still holds up. It's still gruesome and creepy and gross, and like everything you love about Dead Space is there, but it's just cranked up so much that you feel like, oh man, how could they get any grosser? And then yes, Dead Space 3 did kind of kill that off for a lot of people, which is what led us to losing the franchise in the first place. But I feel like that was more on EA for doing things like adding microtransactions and kind of a needless multiplayer. It wasn't that the multiplayer was the worst thing, but it was unnecessary, and it had some content in it like that could have been saved for the game. Like just make it an AI and make it part of the game. That would have been fine, especially considering it came out the same year, I believe, as BioShock Infinite, which made Elizabeth a great AI, especially for the time. She was not like intrusive like older AIs, which hopefully EA would be able to figure out how to do something like that too. For me, there is one small beacon of hope in this whole story, is that Motive is moving to the Iron Man project, and I'm really hoping that they're scraping the DNA of Anthem for the controls of that game, because Anthem still is the best Iron Man game that's ever been made. And anyone who talks about Anthem, they can say everything they want about the content, about how it, the story was bad, sure, all of that, but the gameplay of the flight suits and the weapons all interacting together and stuff, that was 100% Iron Man DNA and everything I ever wanted out of an Iron Man game. And I think that's why I fell in love with it. So I'm hoping maybe Motive is working on that and they can make that Iron Man project something really special that feels like Anthem to play, because if they can nail that and they're helping with that, I will say, okay, you know what? I can deal with not getting Dead Space for a while. Maybe they revisit it down the line and put out Dead Space 2 just to kind of finish that out, and then let Dead Space 3 just die away and never be remembered. But it really is unfortunate to hear that EA has decided that Dead Space is no longer worth pursuing, because Dead Space to me is one of the greatest survival horror franchises, barring number 3, obviously, that's ever been made. The first 2 games are, in my opinion, just so gross and perfect in the survival horror genre. They make you feel just so claustrophobic, so terrified all the time. You hear the noises. I mean, the audio direction, the audio design in Dead Space is out of this world. And if you didn't play that game with headphones on, you really did yourself a disservice, because there's really nothing quite like it. You hear the creaking of the ship, and you hear the things scuttling around in the vents and all that stuff. It's just so, it just leaves you kind of just holding your breath the whole time. You're getting chills up and down your spine, because just how that audio makes you feel, especially when you hear someone like, there's people who, unalive themselves or get caught by the necromorphs and torn apart, and you just hear the sounds of all that happening, and it's so visceral and just gets under your skin. No pun intended with that visceral, by the way. But all of this being said, are you sad to hear that there is no Dead Space 2 remake coming, or a new Dead Space game? This apparently was testing the waters, and this is one of those things that we gotta be vigilant for as gamers, because I saw tons of people saying, oh my god, Dead Space, blah, 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 but it turns out that not enough people bought it. Now, I'm not saying you should just run out and buy every single game, but if you are someone who is a fan of a franchise or something like that, and the franchise comes out and the reviews are good and you're hearing good things, like, don't be afraid to buy a game at full price, because that's what shows that they are going to get the support to make another one. So remember, unless a studio is like an art house studio, if it's something like Remedy, where Remedy knows, hey, our games are not going to sell a ton, but we're making them because we want to tell stories. And as long as we can kind of break even, we're going to make another game in these franchises to keep our universe moving forward. If you're dealing with a company like EA, like Activision, what have you, the profit is the only thing they understand. Unfortunately, no matter how much the diehard fans of Dead Space like me or other people out there love Dead Space, I paid for Dead Space. I would have loved Dead Space 2. I would have paid full price for that. But unfortunately, if not enough people do it, then it's going to result in us seeing the franchises discontinued again. But that's it for me today. What do you guys think about EA making Dead Space dead again? Let us know down in the comments. We'd love to talk to you about it. Talon and I like to talk video games, and we try to read and respond to as many comments as we can. Sometimes we get to more than the others, but we do read just about all of them. And make sure to follow us on Twitter as well, at 59Direct, and you can follow me personally at LittleBobbyTV. The Direct Gaming Twitter is a great way to keep up with what we're doing and talking about if you don't hit that subscribe and ring that notification bell, but you should do that, because that would absolutely help us out in the algorithm. Hey, thank you so much for watching today. Again, I'm LittleBobby here, and we hope to see you soon.